All right, so this is a couple of dumb jocks talking about sports injury, injury rehab, and the psychological implications therein. Yeah, so what are we doing? Where's the podcast?
I mean, we're kind of using this podcast approach because we're trying to target an audience of like college D1 athletes, and given like they don't have a lot of time in their daily lives, I mean, they're going to class, they're going to lifts, going to practice, like nobody has time to stop and read a book or like read off a laptop an article and like write a paper on it, all that jazz.
Like, so much else to do.
Exactly. Like a podcast you can literally listen to on your way to class or before you go to sleep. I mean, you can even listen to it in your team meetings. Like, it's just so portable and accessible that like this is a way that we can reach out to a large audience on this issue of injuries in athletes and like the rehabilitation, more so in the mental aspect of it all in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here. From one, a rehab standpoint, we've got athletes that are injured, that are struggling through recovery, struggling through rehab. Hearing some motivational words from scientific literature, from anecdotal evidence. You guys are athletes. Specifically, what is it that you guys do here?
Yeah, I mean, so I play softball here.
I run track.
So, I mean, we've definitely been through a multitude of injuries. Like, before we even got here, while we're being here, like, I'm still going through injuries. So, there's so much that we can say about that whole, like, storyline, I guess. So, Liv, do you want to talk about yours first?
With my injury?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have spondylolisthesis, which is a mouthful, but it is a lower back injury, and my vertebrae is slipped 80% off of my sacrum.
Which is grade 3?
Yes.
Wow.
I remember that.
Okay.
Oh my god, okay, good job, grade 3 of 4, so it's legit, it's the real deal. Very painful, not fun, do not recommend anybody else getting that injury, but, yeah, it took me out from running for a year, almost an entire year, last year, my first year, so I am a complete redshirt, and every single day, I mean, at one point I struggled to fall asleep, like I was in a back brace 24/7, my first fall here last fall, and I was on medication because it pinched one of my nerves, so I had, I still get it sometimes, I have numbness and like tingling down my leg, and yeah, it has been quite the battle, like,
so
insane.
How did you feel prior to this injury? Like, I'm sure, like, you were, you know, kind of, like, on your high horse, like, you were running free, like, no pain, so, like, I mean, where was, like, your self-esteem before this injury? Like, where were you confidence-wise?
I'm not going to say I was extremely confident, like, I thought I was the best runner ever, because no, I had highs and lows, but my junior year was my best year running. That was when I got my best mile time. That was when I qualified and won a lot of big races, and I was getting a lot of attention from coaches. So I was completely and utterly in love with running and the idea of running in college, post-college, Olympics. Like, I just thought, yes, I found my passion. This is what I'm going to be doing for a while. And, you know, things were just going so well that I was just like, how could it make a turn for the worse? And then, you know, I was still on a high into the fall of my senior year, and then my back pain really started to pick up, and it was just kind of downhill from there, like indoor and outdoor. I remember the end of my outdoor senior season was just terrible. So towards the end of high school, self-esteem and everything were just kind of low. But it wasn't, I feel like it was kind of covered by like all the excitement of being a senior in high school and graduating and prom. So like I didn't really look into it until it was after, when I started summer training for college, that I just did not feel great about myself or running, because I was just in so much pain.
And I can attest to that because, you know, college is a whole different environment. Like, for just being an athlete, like, it's way more competitive within your team, against the teams you compete against. I mean, your coaches demand more out of you, your teammates demand more out of you, your trainers demand more out of you, your professors demand more out of you. So, like, just being in that type of environment and then having a whole injury just takes the control out of your hands and puts it in the coach's hands, the trainer's hands, the doctor's hands, and you just feel like you're spiraling.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
What was your injury?
So coming into college, I had tarsal coalition, meaning my bones and my foot were fused together. So like a month before college, I had to get a surgery to cut the fused bones in my foot and give my foot a joint.
Wow.
Oh,
Using the tendon from the bottom of my foot so that the bones would not go back together once they were cut. So going through that was a year-long process because I had to end up getting a Botox shot in my foot because my toes like just didn't respond well to the surgery and they were just like going crazy. And so
this was here? You
this
got the
was
Botox
yeah.
shot here? Okay.
So most of that year was trying to find answers as to why my foot just wasn't responding well to the surgery and like trying to learn how to relearn to walk and run and all that stuff. So coming here into that really just took me down a path that I just didn't want to go down. Like I already felt the stress of trying to keep my identity as an athlete, impress my coaches, show value to my teammates. And so, given that I couldn't even compete coming in as a first year, I just felt like I really didn't belong. I felt like there was no point in me being here. So
I can
Yeah. And it's interesting. The studies have been done comparing Division I athletes like you guys to Division II and III athletes. And what's interesting is that there is significantly more injuries that occur in Division I athletes versus Division II and III athletes. For example, preseason practice injuries for Division I athletes occur about 7 out of every 1,000 athlete exposures, compared to Division III athletes, where it's about 5. In-game, Division I athletes experience about a rate of 16 injuries per 1,000 athlete exposures. Division III athletes, it's about 13. So there is evidence out there that shows that Division I athletes are under some kind of either greater psychological or physical stress that, predisposes you guys to having a, higher incidence rate for injury. But dig into that. You posed a question about self-esteem earlier. Can you kind of dig into what self-esteem looks like from a preventative approach for athletes for injury and from a rehab approach? Like, how does self-esteem kind of tie into the athlete's lifestyle?
okay, so I mean, first we can just define self-esteem as like one's ability, like one's confidence in their abilities to, I guess, perform a task or just in their just value of anything. So, I mean, you can tie self-esteem into Ryan and DC's self-determination theory. And studies show that, like, if an athlete if their basic needs are fulfilled, they'll have a better or positive perceived return to sport. So basically, its 3 basic needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy in the aspect of an injured athlete can talk about, like, when they choose to return to their sport or if that's determined for them and how that plays into their self-esteem. Like if a coach chooses a player's returning date regardless of when the doctor says they need to return, that athlete is already going to be less apprehensive to go back into the sport and feel like they won't perform as well because they're not ready. Competence deals with like the athlete's confidence in their ability to return to the sport and perform at their previous pre-injury levels. So relatedness talks about like once an athlete gets injured, how they're isolated from the team, if they lose their identity once that injury occurs because they cannot perform for the team.
Right.
And just how they value themselves now so that they cannot contribute to the team.
Can you kind of speak on that in terms of like what is the autonomy in your recovery path, or do you feel like you have autonomy in that? Do you feel like you have that relatedness? Do you like where can you kind of relate to those
in regards to my injury?
Yeah.
And everything. So I guess the autonomy, my trainer kind of already gave me the set, like I'm gonna start from ground zero, so I like expect a very long process. So I already knew it wasn't gonna be a quick recovery.
Right.
So I accepted that from the get-go, and I just decided, okay, I think we're gonna start from the bottom and work my way up. So, going into it, I kind of knew it was gonna be a long process, so I just told myself to be really positive and, go in every day with the intentions of getting better. And my coaches, and my coach was very, very supportive of that. He understood just the severity of my injury, so I had support from my coach, my trainers, and even my teammates. Yes, it was hard coming in being a first year because no one really knew me, so it's kind of weird. But my coach's advice to me was just to try and be as present as possible, like when I can be.